Hello and welcome to the home of the Ghost Owl, and we are now at the rare units in the Empire Army list as part of our Warhammer The Old World faction focus, where we take a look at the 8th edition Army book rules to see how they played then, to give us an idea of how they might play with different rules but in the same role in Warhammer The Old World. And the rare units can so often be the most fun, certainly the most different in an army list. So let's see what we've got. And continuing kind of the theme we ended on at the special special part 2 episode, where we were looking at war machines, we start with the war machine in the rare units, and it's a good one. It's the Hell Blaster volley gun. Average ballistic skill, good leadership, equipment is a hand weapon war machine with 3 crewmen, and they get the volley gun special rule, which is you roll 3 artillery dice for the number of shots. Now, if you roll a single misfire, you halve the number of shots on the remaining 2 dice. If you roll 2 misfires, you roll on the misfire table. If you're lucky enough, to roll 3 misfires, depending what you're shooting at, you actually fire all 30 shots, and then you blow up, and you're destroyed, and you're removed from the table. So, quite interesting there. Now, of the 2 rare artillery units, I prefer the Hellblaster. It's 24-inch range, so it's got a short range, which is its main downside, but it is strength 5, and it's armor piercing. It's got the potential for a large number of shots, which could be devastating. I feel it's less swingy than the 3 templates you get from the Hellstorm rocket battery. The main issue is the range, which makes it more vulnerable and needs protecting. But most of the time you're looking to get the big volleys off from sort of turn 3 onwards on those advancing units, while trying to stay out of range of enemy missile infantry. So the range was a limiting factor, but when this thing went off, it was absolutely devastating, and it had value because of the way it works. It had value whether you shot it at a monster, a single entity monster, or whether you shot it at a big unit, because essentially it's a number of hits. There's no templates with this. So this had value and flexibility over the Hellstorm rocket battery. You're not reliant on those templates, which are scattering all over the place. So the biggest downside being, are you going to roll misfire on those 3 dice? And, you could, if you roll 2, which is unlucky if you do, it's like rolling 2 1s out of 3 dice. It can happen, but you're unlucky if it does. But most of the time, you're going to get a decent number of shots. So, not personally for me, that was my preferred choice in the rare units for an artillery piece. So the flip side to that one is the Hellstorm rocket battery. All the same, except special rules are Hellstorm rockets. So you fire D3 rockets, which is the small round template. It does have a 48-inch range. It is strength 3, but strength 3 under the central hole. It's armor piercing though. And you roll an artillery dice for each rocket, and it always counts as indirect, even if you have line of sight. Now, it is capable of high damage against those low toughness, low armoured units, but overall, it's more swingy, I think, and less flexible than the Hellblaster. So this unit, for me, rarely seen. Definitely fun to use. If you're the person like me who leans into gunline list, then you may well see a Hellblaster, a Hellstorm, and a steam tank, for example. You can fit that in your rare units. So, that's something that you might see. So you just take both. That does give you then the flexibility of range, right? So the Hellblaster limited on range, where generally you're going to be hitting people almost from turn 1 with your Hellstorm. To weaken some of those infantry units, skirmishing units, or even enemy missile infantry if they're close enough. So, yes, definitely an option to take this and a Hellblaster. If you can only pick one, I would go for the Hellblaster personally, as I think overall it's more flexible despite the lack of range. So next up is the steam tank, and this thing's got a ton of rules, but man alive, is it an iconic unit. A lot of people saying, are we going to see steam tanks in Warhammer The Old World? Well, certainly from a timeline perspective, if we think it's in the 23rd century, which is 2200 of the Imperial calendar, probably somewhere from 2250 onwards, as we're saying it's a few years before the great invasion of Chaos Azavar Kull. then steam tanks are around in that period. And in theory, there should be more steam tanks then than there is in Warhammer Fantasy Battle near the end times, because no more were built, but less had been destroyed. So there actually should be more steam tanks around during Warhammer The Old World. Stats wise, high strength, toughness, and wounds, but it does have low movement, initiative, and attacks. Right, equipment wise, you get a hand weapon and a repeater pistol with the option for a Hochland long rifle. That's on the crewman. You've got a steam cannon, which is a strength 10, multiple wound D6, 12-inch plus 12-inch for each steam point that you use. I.e., for that, you can generate steam points. That cannon is 12-inch range, and for every steam point you add to firing it, you add another 12 inches. Steam engine, similar system. You get 1 steam point for each D6-inch move. So the movement is always random, but you can try and mitigate some of that by adding steam points to it. Definitely works earlier on, becomes more of a challenge later in the game when you're much closer to things, but then obviously you don't need the guaranteed movement as much. Steam gun is the other weapon, which is the turret on the top. That's a breath weapon. It's strength 2, and for each steam point you add, you gain +1 strength. Right, so and chariot, and with an armor save of 1+, so it's got great armor. Now, just thinking about those steam points, that's in the special rules. We'll just jump to that one. It does have a maximum of 5. So you think, okay, I want the extra range on the gun. I want the extra movement. I want the extra strength on the breath weapon. You know, I need to think about how I'm using these points. And of course, you know, when you're generating these steam points, which are used for actions, there's obviously always this risk of causing boiler mishaps. And of course, the more points that you take, the more chance of mishap there is. It is a large target. It does cause terror, and it is unbreakable. So that's very nice. Steel Behemoth, you can move. You can shoot, move, or fire weapons even if you move, which is very nice. It cannot overrun. It cannot pursue, and it cannot do a combat reform, and automatically restrains. And we've talked about it does have random movement. Like, it's fun, it's surprisingly useful unit despite its potential swinginess with its boiler mishaps and its steam and everything else. But I often included a steam tank. I just think they're cool and fun on the tabletop, and they actually could have value. And if they did pop off and you didn't get your boiler mishaps and stuff, you could actually do some quite good damage. Essentially, you've got a shorter range great cannon in there. That strength 10 multiple wounds D6 is great. Breath weapon, if you're coming up against those hordes of zombies, you know, you only need to give it 1 steam point for strength 3, and it's looking good. It's got that great armor save, and it's unbreakable as well. So overall, you know, pretty good. It could, you know, reasonably, it's 250 points, which means that, you know, actually with that great cannon on the front, you know, you've got good opportunity for making back its points, if not more. You know, it's toughness 6. It's got 10 wounds, so it's pretty durable overall. Yes, there's a lot of things going to be targeting it, but you know, if those things are shooting at your steam tank, they're not shooting at your other units, right? So overall, a great unit, a fun unit, an iconic unit, and one that I often would take on the tabletop. Right, we've now got 2 interesting units to wrap up the rare section of the Empire, and the first one being the Celestial Hurricane, and we saw this mentioned as part of a mount for a Battle Wizard Lord. So it has average strength, toughness, wounds, and leadership, low initiative. The equipment of the crew is a hand weapon. It's a chariot with a 5+ save, and the crew is 2 acolytes, and it's drawn by 2 warhorses. So it's large target. Now it comes with some special rules, which is a Locus of Azir is +1 power dice. Portents of Battle, which is all units in 6 inches get +1 to hit, which means it really needs to be up on the front line, or you stick it with next to a bunch of ranged units, could be interesting as well. And it does come with a Storm of Shemtek bound spell. It's a power level 4, 24-inch range, small template, and it's a random effect. So you roll your d6. If you roll a 1, you do nothing. If you roll a 2, you get a strength 2 -1 to hit with the small template. If you get a 3, you rotate the enemy unit around, so you can turn the enemy unit to face a different direction. If you roll a 4 to 5, you get a strength 6 hit under the center of the template and strength 3 everyone else. And then if you roll a 6, you get a strength 8 multiple wound d6 under the center and strength 3 on everything else. So quite swingy there. You've got a 50% chance of doing some damage, and you know, less, 50% chance of doing not very much. I mean, turning an enemy unit around could be interesting and stuff, if you're going to charge them in the rear or something like that. But yeah, it's but it's also it's a bound spell as well, so it needs to be cast right. So it's not a terrible choice. It's 130 points, so it's 10 points more than your Hellblasters and your Hellstorms. Toughness 5 wounds, 5+ save. It's not that durable. You probably want it, you're going to want it within 24 inches, right? Be able to cast its spell. You're going to want it within 6 inches of units to give them the +1 to hit. So you're going to have it reasonably far forward. Certainly if it's at 24 inches, it's in range of a lot of enemy missile fire, war machines, spells, and at toughness 5 wounds and a 5+ save. How long is it really going to last? Also, for a lot of people, didn't like the aesthetic. It wasn't a flavour of mine. So this comes down to this high fantasy, low fantasy style across the board. Like I say, the Empire did have a tendency to have a low fantasy look for most of its units. And you have these kind of demigryphs and celestial hurricanums that sort of came in at the 8th edition. That were very high fantasy, and they look more Age of Sigmar-esque, in fact, compared to Warhammer Fantasy Battle. So, personally, not the biggest fan of the aesthetic of this thing, and to be honest, in the rare category, just better and more consistent choices. And as a gunline person, I would tend towards the artillery than taking something like this. Not to say this is a terrible unit. I do think, though, it is inherently weak in that you're putting 130 points in a unit that wouldn't take much to remove it from the battlefield. And finally up is the dual kit with this, which is the Luminarch of Hysh. So the Celestial Hurricane and the Luminarch of Hysh are a dual kit. You can choose which one you want to build. Average stats wise: strength, toughness, wounds, and leadership. Low initiative. Equipment, hand weapon. It is a chariot 5+ again. Crews 2 acolytes and drawn by 2 warhorses, because essentially it's the same basic kit with something different on top. Now, obviously, it gets 3 different special rules. So this one has an aura of protection, so all units in 6 get a 6+ ward save. So there you go, you're choosing between the ward save and a +1 to hit. Locus of Hysh is +1 dispel. The other one was +1 power. So again, choosing what you want to do. This one is giving you more durability to your army, being able to dispel enemy spells and ward saves. The other one's giving you more damage output in theory. It does come with Solheim's Bolt of Illumination. It's a bound spell. It's power level 4. It's a 36-inch range, strength 8, multiple wound d3, flaming attack, and penetrate ranks like a bolt thrower with no armor save. And it does re-roll against undead, Nehekaran, and demonic. Again, not a terrible choice at 120 points. And certainly, I would prefer this one over the Celestial Hurricanum, because you could afford to keep this one back a little bit further. Yes, you would lose the 6+ ward save of those front line units, but is that a terrible thing? 6+ ward save, yeah, it's okay. Might save you 1 or 2 if you lose enough. But you're really relying on the +1 dispel dice and that Bolt of Illumination to do something against the enemy. It's toughness 5 wounds, 5+ save again. So the durability is an issue with that large target. The randomness of the bound spell is okay, but for targeting monsters and mounted characters, you've got your great cannon, you've got your steam tank, you've got your Hellblaster volley gun. To be honest, I think I'd rather take the artillery, which I think is better overall and more consistent. You've got strength 10 instead of strength 8, for example. Steam tank able to do more things, and yes, while this does have penetrate ranks, I think I'd still rather have the number of shots you get from a Hellblaster or the templates you get from the Hellstorm. So it just kind of is overall I think they're just better shooting choices, which is really what this thing is good at. And again, you come down to the aesthetic point of view. Not a fan of the aesthetic of this for my particular style of army. So personally, I didn't use it, and I didn't see it on the tabletop that much either at all as well. So that's it. That brings us to the end of the Empire main army list. I hope it's been interesting, informative, a refresher, and useful for those people that have never come into contact with the Empire in Warhammer Fantasy Battle before. You can see the different in flavour and style across the army as well, where, as I said, with that sort of low fantasy and high fantasy, which is sort of that more Age of Sigmar aesthetic that came in at the end of 8th edition, and you kind of had that choice of how you wanted to stylize your army, but also looking at how the rules were for these units and giving us an idea of how they might be in Warhammer The Old World. Interesting thing with Celestial Hurricanum and Luminarch of Hysh, are they going to be in the Old World? There's no colleges of magic, for example. I have a sneaky suspicion, in theory, they shouldn't be, but they could always be included. So we'll see, because they are a plastic kit. They're relatively new plastic kit for Warhammer Fantasy Battle, so they could be included, but there are no colleges of magic. So in my mind, they don't really fit in an Empire army. That brings us to the end of this episode. We've got legendary lords and heroes still to come. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you didn't, give it a thumbs down. Let me know why in the comments down below, and please hit that subscribe button. Free for you to do. Absolutely massive deal for me, so thank you for that in advance. You've been watching The Ghost Owl. Tune back in for our legendary Empire lords.